So
Oh, jeez.
you were saying about
So there's
Angie
this.
Tribeca,
No, no. I think you're thinking of Whitney
the marvelous
Cummings.
Mrs. Maisel, the
I,
marvelous.
what was that show with Whitney Cummings? Because there was Inside with Amy Schumer, or Inside of Amy Schumer, and it was like it was designed to be gross. And then there
Right.
was Whitney Cummings. She had a show, and it was a play on her last name being Cummings.
I know. I
Um,
remember which one it is. It's
yeah, but
Sally Jesse Raphael,
yeah, that's the one. That's what it's called.
Montel Williams.
But no, this show it's called
Blake,
YOLO
Rick Blake.
Crystal. It's called YOLO Crystal Extreme or something, and it's um it's an Australian show, but it's
Oh.
very poorly animated.
Oh, is it that fat blonde that's in all those fat blonde movies?
It's a cartoon.
Oh, then
No,
we're not
so
thinking of the same thing.
no, it's a cartoon on Adult Swim. I've made
Well,
this clear. I've said this several times. Um, but she goes. There's one of the episodes. Rachel, she's like, they're two girls or whatever. One of them's name is Rachel, and the other one I forget her name. But they get to this thing that the other girl wanted to go to, and as soon as they get there, they realize that they don't have the tickets, and immediately the other chick turns on Rachel, and she's like, "You're so stupid, Rachel!" And like everybody starts singing about how stupid Rachel is, and but the boys and I were watching it the one day, and we were laughing and laughing because it's just like immediately she just turns on her, and she's like, "You're so stupid, Rachel." And that became our joke for the longest time. We would just, anytime anything went wrong, we'd be like, "You're so stupid, Rachel. You're so dumb."
weird when shows about women are funny. I can't think of that many. You know what show that was about a woman was pretty good was Parks and Rec. That was a pretty funny show.
Well,
I
that
think
also had Nick Offerman in it.
it did. Nick Offerman was great in that show, and the guy Space Lord or whatever his name is. What's that dude?
Starfire. Yeah, Star Lord.
Yeah,
Star
yeah,
Lord
your
Fire.
boy. Yes, your boy. But what's her name? Amy Poehler
Mm-hmm.
plays this like incredibly over the top nice person, and for some reason, it's really funny. It's like a really good show. It's wholesome even.
Amy
So
Poehler, if I'm not mistaken, she was on Upright Citizens Brigade, right? Remember
no,
that show?
no, was she? I don't know.
I think so. I think she was.
Isn't
Upright
that?
Citizens Brigade. Not a lot of people liked that show. Um,
No, I never watched it. I'm trying to think of it. Is that the one with the girl with the big teeth? What's her name?
no,
She has like
you're, that's
overbite.
uh, that's Strangers with Candy.
Strangers with Candy, and she had
Yeah,
that big overbite. What was that lady's name? That actress?
I don't remember her name. She's still around. She still does
Someone
stuff.
knows. Yeah, someone knows. That was such a bizarre show to me because she plays this character with this big giant overbite, right, all the time, right? She always
Yeah,
has this
yeah, yeah.
overbite, and then she has this like she's really old, but she's in high school. This is me describing to you a show that I've never watched.
Well, I can
Just
explain it. I used to watch it all the time. I'd still, in fact, watch it to
so
this
you
day.
know, but you don't know the actress's name. But she
I
plays this
don't.
character that's in high school, but she's really old, and she has this ridiculous overbite. And that's the gist of what I ever knew about this show, mind
Yeah.
you.
Well, she like it's hard for me to demonstrate because I have the mustache, but she kind of like it's not just an overbite, but she's biting on her lower lip at the same time, so it's even more disgusting.
Yeah. You know what was a pretty good show? I don't remember if it was on if we're talking about women in comedy shows. I remember one, I don't know if it was Comedy Central, maybe it was comedies. It had to be. But it was two blonde, two British ladies, and it was called Absolutely Fabulous. And they were like these cunty old British chicks. And I never watched that show either, but I remember thinking, I bet that show's funny, but it didn't appeal to me enough for me to like go. It wasn't Workaholics. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's the show that appeals to me.
They can't all be workaholics.
Yeah, they can't all be workaholics. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
I think you would like Strangers with Candy. The whole reason she was in high school is because she dropped out because she became a prostitute and got involved in drugs and just like made every bad decision you can make in high school. And then she decides like after everything falls apart and she hits rock bottom, she decides to go back and try again. she's like she's old as hell, and she's in high school, but like the teachers are very funny in that show. And this is what the hell's his name? Stephen Colbert is in it before he became a piece of shit.
Oh, really?
He's one of the teachers, and then there's this gay. Well, he's gay too, but there's like the gay art teacher, who's like very flamboyantly gay, like very obviously gay. And then the principal's name is Principal Blackman, and he's a black man.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that. Yeah,
and
I think we talked about that.
And like
That
the
was
family
could laugh at gays because it was funny. It was funny to laugh at gays.
Yeah, back when it was okay, back
gays
before
are funny.
everyone just turned around and they decided, nah, it's no longer funny to. Things that were funny are no longer funny anymore. Like, who decided that? I don't know, but somebody did.
It's a shame. I mean, we still laugh at those things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think that'll ever change because we don't have to, like, we don't have somebody over us telling us, no, we're not allowed to laugh at those things anymore. We're not. You have to change who you are as a person in order to continue this role that you're playing, right? Like, we're not a role. We're just two guys who don't have any oversight, and we can say and laugh at whatever we want. Like, I bet you if you got Jimmy Kimmel in a room alone and you were just hanging out and talking, you could still make him laugh by making jokes about gay people or whatever, or talking about chicks with big jugs. I bet you could get him to laugh at like domestic abuse jokes, but like on TV he has to play this crying bitch character, where he like, well, they're not they're changing the rules of healthcare, and they're not catering to the 0.03% of the of the United States that is the trans community.
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
Right? Jimmy Kimmel. We're talking about the guy that used to be on the Man Show.
Yes.
Talking about not having foresight. The guy has done blackface, and he was on a show called The Man Show where they glorified chicks jumping on trampolines, scantily clad, I might add. I mean, that show was like the epitome of like misogyny. It was like, it should have just been called misogyny. In fact, there's a really funny video of him walking around getting people to touch his dick on a Man Show episode. I think it's like a fruit or something that's in there, but he's walking around getting people to accidentally brush up against it. And it was a bit on the show that they got away with. Of course, now they wouldn't get away with it. And
no.
Try to show, like, I'd like to go on Jimmy Kimmel one day, and when he's just all, let us see a clip from your movie, and then I just play that scene. I play his bit of him getting like all these chicks to touch his, like, fake prosthetic dong or whatever.
Or doing the eliminate women's suffrage, and what was the other one he did? Oh, like you said, the blackface. He was Karl Malone.
Yeah.
And I'm Karl Malone. And I think what happened was he dated Sarah Silverman, and she kind of fucked him up because she's obviously that super social justice warrior. Horrible. I used to think she was the same way too. So she used to be just as foul as he was. And if you watch the Sarah Silverman program,
kind of funny back in the day.
Oh, she was very funny back in the day. I used to watch her show, the Sarah Silverman program, religiously. I thought it was very funny. But then all of a sudden she decided, oh no, we can't be doing these types of jokes anymore. One of her songs, it's called German Cars, and all it is her listing off all these like over-the-top stereotypical things about different races and different types of people, and it's very funny, very offensive, and it's not something that I'm sure she's happy to be brought up in conversation, certainly not on camera. But I recommend going and checking out that video, because even the song itself is fun to listen to. It's talking about how the title gets its name from the part where she says there's some like inconsistency with Jewish people driving German cars, and and it's all the things. It's kind of like a love song, but it's written in a way that's like extremely xenophobic and intolerant. It's very funny though. It's called Sarah Silverman's German Cars. This is back when she was funny. Um,
Back when she was funny.
what else? What else? What did you do this week, V? Let's hear about your week.
Oh man,
What's
why?
that joke
Oh,
that
yeah.
you told me about this joke that you wrote, and I know you wanted to talk about it on the show. Go ahead, if you would.
Well, I can't now. Well, okay, I don't know if I should or not. I started
You don't
trying to
have
write.
to. I just did
Well,
that
I'm
because you
obligated now.
didn't
You
want me
put me on the
to.
spot when
You
you
said
told
you
me
didn't. You said you didn't want me to, so you know I
there's
had to
no
do it.
punchline. There's no punchline, and it goes nowhere. But the build up to it is hilarious. Okay, so this farmer hears these weird sounds out in his shed, his where all his hay is at, and he goes out there and there's a Bigfoot like in the shed, like just standing there, like 10 feet, 15 feet tall. However big Bigfoot is, a big giant Bigfoot, right? A real live Bigfoot we're talking. And so the farmer is like, "Holy shit, what is happening here? This is the great like." Bigfoot is in my thing, right? And Bigfoot's there with this with the pitchfork, which is like the size of like a regular fork, and he's like using it as a comb to like scrape at his buttocks, right, or his ass for the layman for, the, for the layman's. And he's like, "What are you doing, Bigfoot? Like, what's up with that? Like, you're you're weird. Like, why are you doing that?" He goes, "Oh, well, it's cold, and when I shit, I get little shit stuck to my fur, right? And so I have to kind of scrape it out, because they stay there forever, and it starts to hurt after a while. They get all twisted and weird." And so the farmers, "Oh, I know what these are. They're called dingleberries. See, I have dogs, and my dogs get dingleberries. And what we do is we shave their butts bare so they don't have the dingleberries during the winter. Now, mind you, your butt is going to get a little bit cold because obviously you don't wear any clothes, which is that's to each his own or whatever. But but so then he goes, "All right, well, why don't you go ahead and do that for me and shave my butt." And so he bends over and he gets out the shearing shears, right? The shears, they use them for like this is a thing, like this happens to farmers. He knows what he's doing, so he gets behind Bigfoot and he starts shaving his ass. He starts shaving Bigfoot's ass. Now, mind you, this is like a huge, I mean, we're talking Bigfoot's ass, dude. Like, how big would you imagine? Like, what would you say a Bigfoot ass?
2.5 feet squared, I would say. So maybe 3 feet squared.
So that's like the size of two of my heads, right? So it's taking him a while to kind of get through this ass, and he's going through Bigfoot's ass with these shears, and he's just going to town, right? Like getting rid of all these dingleberries, and he's starting to feel good, like he's doing something good for this poor Bigfoot or whatever. Anyways, I don't know where it's supposed to end, so I know it sucks that there's no punchline, and I like everybody's probably like, "Well, what the fuck happens?" But I don't have a punchline. And since Tom put me on the spot, I thought maybe I'd tell you guys. And if you have any idea of anything comedy or funny, I urge you to try to think of a punchline to that joke because the buildup is pretty good.
So here's
I don't
my
have
thing.
any like thing for the end of it. That's all I got.
Here's what I do. And this is this. I'm glad you joined me in this camp of like telling a joke before it's ready, because that's something that I enjoy doing on
Above
here.
it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I do it. And sometimes I do it on Twitter too, where I have a joke kind of in the works, and rather than finishing it, because I start all these projects that I don't ever finish,
Right.
and jokes are the same way. What I'll do is I'll release all the background information and I'll put it on the viewer or the reader or the
Right.
whoever's listening, and force them to deal with it, because then if it's funny, I can claim credit for it, right? But if it's not funny, I can blame them, and I'd be like, well, you didn't finish it good, right?
Yeah.
The joke is, I mean, there's enough there for you to work with, right? So, and then they kind of feel a little guilty if they don't do a good job with it, right? Because they're like, well, maybe it is my fault that this joke isn't funny because, you know, he put it on me to finish the joke, and if I can't make it funny, then that's a
Right.
problem. That's a me problem, right? So I do that often, where like I'll give you what you need to make a joke, and then if it's like a do-it-yourself joke, it's what they are.
Yeah. There you go.
Um,
DIY joke.
yeah, and so I think that's a good formula. You talk about all these like comedic formulas and what it takes to make a good joke. I find ways to like push the responsibility off of myself. That's my formula. It's like you make some of it and then you hand it off. That's the
Yeah.
formula. And
Pass the buck. The
yeah,
old pass.
exactly. Yeah, just
Yeah,
get
okay,
rid of it
fair enough.
as soon as possible.
So if you could think of a funny punchline to that joke or a zinger or something, you know,
V will buy
got a
you a shower
Bigfoot getting
curtain.
his butt shaved, getting his butt sheared. It just seemed so funny to me, the imagery of having to get rid of Bigfoot dingleberries. Yeah.
Did you explain the purpose behind that type of joke? What'd you call it? The
Oh, it's
benign.
called a benign violation. Yeah, well, I've been researching these comedy theory things, and all these different things are coming up, really interesting things about like what's funny. And it turns out that a benign violation, like something that doesn't have anything to do with you, like it's not your family or you, like it's not directly you, and it's violating someone else. So as long as it doesn't bother you that it's happening to someone else, it's funny. And that like it's like it turns out that that is like a really good theory because that's why we find things funny as we can look at somebody and go, oh, that guy's an idiot. Like I always say, have you ever watched a show and like thought, man, this guy's such an idiot, but it's so funny, like it's so funny that he's an idiot. That's usually like the main reason why we laugh at things is because we like to feel superior to other people. We just laugh at them, go, oh, that idiot. Someone bumps his head and you're like, ha ha, right? Like Nelson or whatever from The Simpsons. That's the whole point of him is that he's laughing at everything that's happening to everybody else. As long as it doesn't happen to Nelson, it's funny.
I forgot to unmute myself. You made a joke that essentially distances most of the population, if not, well, most of the population. We'll stick with that, so as not to like paint myself into a corner here, because most of us are not farmers. Most of us don't have a barn.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Most of us have never seen a Bigfoot, and nearly all of us have never shaved Bigfoot's ass. So I think the pattern that I'm seeing is that you have to like kind of continue to make it be something that doesn't like even adding more details that distances you further from the
Yeah,
main
yeah.
character, right? So like a Chinese farmer, right? Because we don't know any Chinese farmers, and certainly we are not Chinese farmers. Uh, Goes into his 2-story barn or 3-story barn. Even people who have barns don't have a 3-story barn. So like the more you can distance yourself while still maintaining some sort of realism, I think that could factor into it. But then you'd have to kind of like make that part of the joke like you could make it like an extremely extremely offensive joke where me have I have many pig who, or I have many dog who get dingleberry, and you make the Chinese guy talking like a stereotypical Chinese guy, so you can add to it and make it even more so like a benign theory, but also like an explicit or graphic or offensive. We'll say explicit, benign comedy theory where you just like make it extra offensive too on top of everything else. So you could be like a modern philosopher if you were to do something like that, some kind of modern comedy philosopher.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's my take on the whole thing. Uh, I'm
God,
writing down
what
all
did
these
you do?
names here.
Anything cool, or are we at that point where we got to start addressing people in the chat?
I guess we're at that point. I don't have anything particularly interesting to talk about. I guess we could briefly talk about this whole Israel Palestine business. Um,
Why? We don't even care about it. We don't even care about it. It's like
who
what? What's
cares
gonna
about
happen?
that stuff?
Just to give the information out, I get it, but like it's not something that we're going, well, like I don't lose sleep over Israel or Palestine, either one.
You
It
know
doesn't
what I
matter to
did?
me.
I did today some Palestine. That's the thing is like when you don't care about either one, you get to watch all the people who are really like really serious about this issue when they're like they have a side picked out who they're rooting for, which team they're rooting for. You get to watch all those guys get real hot and bothered about. Oh, did you see what fucking Israel did? Oh my gosh, did you see what Palestine did? And they get all excited about it. Or like mortified or whatever if their team loses. But like if you're not on either team, you really just get to laugh at the misfortunes of both. So when they're like, "Oh, did you see what Israel did?" I did. What would you think? I thought it was that it happened. Whoa, what about Palestine? What about it? Well, did you see how they? I did. Well, how do you feel about that? I don't. Okay, like you just get to be like just very curt with them and be like, who cares?
Yeah,
this is not my problem.
It's like when my sister that I always talk about. She goes, well, don't you care about what's going on in Puerto Rico? And I was like, what? Like, no, not at all, not one bit. I don't even think about Puerto Rico. Is it a country? Is it a state? Who knows? I don't even know that much about it. I could care less. Yeah. That's where I'm at with Palestine and Israel. Like, what the fuck? How does it affect me? If they were like, oh no, you couldn't get batteries for your cell phones or your video games anymore, then I might, go to war. Then I might go to war.
Be like, all right, go Palestine.
Yeah, I don't care.
Well,
Sorry.
it was like that post that I did.
You want to talk about it, or you can talk about it?
Not really. All right, Walter, let's settle down in the chat. We already talked about this.
We got another racist in the chat.
We
tracked so many Nazis, dude.
I know.
Why is that?
Because we shit on everybody, so we get like all the Nazis, but then we don't get any of the Black Lives Matter or all cops are bastards guys, because they're like, well, no, tolerance is key, but since we're like intolerant, it kind of attracts that crowd.
I guess.
No, I don't. It's like that post that I did the other day about where I said, well, it's Palestine dating back to the ancient days. It was Palestine's land, so it belongs to the Palestinians. And then people are like, well, no, it was given to the Israelis by God, so it belongs to the Israelis, whatever. And then I posted that picture of James Franco on Buster Scruggs, where it's like, well, I don't want either of them to have it. Because I don't think either one of them frankly deserve it. They've proven that they can't, if it's like when two kids are fighting over a toy and you're like, well, now neither one of you gets it, and you take it and you put it up on the shelf. That's what I feel should happen with Israel. Like, just and Palestine or whatever, just take it away from them and kick everybody out of it, turn it into a fucking parking lot or something. I don't know, dude.
Have we discussed like our standpoint on like imperialism though? Like, have we really talked about it much? I don't know if we ever, like, because, I'm a fan of imperialism, especially like the Teddy Roosevelt era. We were all up in Cuba's butt and just kind of like making the Panama Canal and shit. Chanel? Is it Chanel? A Panama Canal.
Chanel.
Yeah, the Panama Chanel number 5. When we were doing that was badass. Like, we need resources, so how are you supposed to get resources from other countries when you can't negotiate with them? You got to go in there and take them. That's all there is to it. The same with land. We don't have enough land, so I don't know. I have a leaning towards imperialism. I'm not against it, if it betters us, what do I care about anybody else? That's kind of my standpoint.
I agree. I'm inclined to agree with you.
Like, I'm not saying I'd go into like Africa just so I could take out all the black people. I'm saying I'd go where Africa is because they have diamond mines there and people love diamonds. They get married all the time. It's like a useful thing to have. So I'm just saying, like, resources are more important than human lives, I think.
Well, it's stuff that we want, right? And stuff, is more important than human lives. Like that argument, well, if somebody's breaking into your house to steal your stuff, and you kill them, what you're saying is your stuff is more, you value your stuff more than you do human life. Be like, well, they clearly valued my stuff more than human life because they were willing to sacrifice themselves potentially to take my stuff. So we are both on the same page in that regard. But no, I agree. I think I am a firm believer in, as you said, in imperialism, conquering and colonization. I'm huge into that. I think if a country invades another country and is able to conquer that portion of the country and like cordon it off and make it into their own, that's theirs as far as I'm concerned. That's the only reason I kind of like I get Israel, where I get what they're doing, because over the last 50, 60 years, they've conquered, they've taken all this land from Palestine, right? And since Israel was acknowledged by the United Nations as a nation state, they've done this over the last half a century or so. So I can sit here and say I don't necessarily agree. I certainly don't agree with Israel and the over. Well, I'll just say all the shit that they've done in the past that has impacted other countries through subversive acts. I would say that I'm against that. But if they're conquering land and the other nation is losing that land, I can't fault them for that. But it's all this nonsense about, well, you white people colonized, or I'm sorry, they stole the land from the natives, from the Native Americans. This is stolen land. And I always want to remind people, well, no, we didn't steal it, we conquered it, right? Like there was
great.
there was either fighting that resulted in us taking the land and we won, which gave us the land, or we bought it from the people who didn't know the value of beads or whatever. We're like, hey, can we buy this land from you and give them beads? And they were like, yeah, sure. And they gave us the land for beads and fire water and shit. So, I mean, that's fine. I think that's okay. If you either legally, through trade, through bartering, or you conquer land, I think that land is yours. But the problem now is it's so very difficult to try to conquer land, try to take land without all these other busybodies getting involved, right? So, like, if a country wants to take over some land and they invade, all of a sudden, all these nations kind of get involved and it turns into this serious civil war nightmare where you've got like a dozen countries all descending upon one country with their military, right? So I think if more people would just mind their fucking business and stay out of international affairs between two nations, I think whatever, I think that's fine. It's like two guys fighting in school. What's the first thing you would always see is like some busybody would come along and say, no, get off of him, no, stop fighting, or whatever. Like, just stay out of it, let them fight and be done with it. Nobody's gonna kill anybody. They're just gonna duke it out and that'll be that. But anyways, all these, like I said, it's the busybodies of the world that make these situations far more complex than they really need to be. And again, it's that whole nonsense of democracy of like, oh, well, we're all in this together and we all need to make these rules about war and all this bullshit. And like the Geneva Convention, having rules regarding war and only certain people abide by them, kind of the same as like the Paris Treaty Accord. It was like this thing that was hey, everybody signs on to it, but it favors certain countries over others, and everyone was so stupid that they signed on to it, not realizing that China doesn't have to do shit for like 20 years, and it all depends on the buy-in of everybody. So this whole Geneva Convention thing, the fighting, all that bullshit, I think it would be a lot quicker and less painful if we would just stand back and let other nations handle their own business. But we don't do that, which is unfortunate. That's my opinion on the matter. I think I agree with you, though. I think if somebody wants to take over land, by all means, go nuts, and stop, stop caring about human life so much, right? Like, if you didn't want to get killed, you probably wouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. To get involved in some kind of conflict like that, you have to understand that, oh, I am putting my own life at risk for what? For stuff, right? And who fucking cares about stuff? And if America takes over Cuba, which I don't know why we would, it's a dump. But if America takes over Cuba, that's great for Cubans because, all of a sudden they have representation in the United States government. They get the fucking Congress will find a way to send them $20 trillion of taxpayer money just to rebuild Cuba, and so that they can continue to do whatever nonsense they were doing down there for the last 100 fucking years. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Not that we were on a topic to begin with. It's stupid to me. Take the car batteries or whatever from the mines down in Africa. You have my blessing, V.
Fucking hey, man. What do you want me to say? Well, if you want me to get on that, it's just hard to get into that because then you start going, well, also all these people have something to gain by backing some country, right? Like the Soviets were back in Cuba, and that's why back in the 60s we had to kind of have the Cold War because Soviets were, doing their stuff with Cuba. But it all comes down to who gains from who and whose side you want. It's like picking your team at like fucking dodgeball, and the winner gets like your land or your fucking resources. Like, okay, I got to pick all these people, so it's all down to who's going to side with you, which I get. Like the United Nations makes sense, but like, man, when the deals are like shitty, like what did Trump say? Like the worst deal in the history of fucking deals. Like when the deals are like that, it's like, why are we helping these people? Like who's negotiating this shit? And that is when we can start to blame the fucking goddamn bureaucracy and dumbass fucking bureaucrats that are involved in making these deals because they're terrible at it. And they think cows are fucking farting and causing goddamn, pollution.
Yeah.
And they're turning the frogs gay.
They're turning the freaking farts gay.
Turning the freaking frogs gay. You know what I mean? Like really, that's what, and not to make fun of Alex Jones, but that's what it comes down to. And like I've been, man, and it's funny because I didn't want to jump into this right away, but I've been down lately since we did this JFK episode because it made me realize how fucking corrupt government in general is. Like you can't have a fucking system to rule or to fucking, cover each other's back that doesn't have corruption. There's no system without corruption or anomalies or whatever. So there's always going to be that shit. So what do? Do you cry about it and you go, oh, you gotta fucking, save the whales and save whatever and do all this gay shit? Or do you just accept it and like assimilate? That's like the two options essentially. Or you like live off the grid and like don't do anything but grow your own food. Like that's it. You're not going to get electricity. You're not going to get any of those comforts you like. All that stuff that you like is just gone. If you live off the grid, that's what's going to happen. But if you assimilate, then you have like all this opportunity, right? You have like, it's hard for me not to pitch like that greed is good, right? Like that being greedy is good. That's what the American dream is. Even Ronald Reagan, he switched from being liberal because he was like, no, like getting things is what makes us happy. Like there's no denying that. And the American dream is to like make that life yourself. Like, start a business or, do something that you've always wanted to do with your life. Like find your dream and just do that. Figure it out. And like, let's be honest, the government affords you lots of ways to do what you want to do with your life, unless you're like a fucking retard and like are an idiot. Like that's all there is to it. If you're an idiot and a drug addict or like some fucking loser that doesn't do anything, then you're not going to get those fucking opportunities. You're not going to take advantage of them. Even if you are a drug addict and all those things, there are still opportunities for you to get out of that. Like there's all that stuff. So you kind of have to appreciate the system for that. But then you go, or you could be the person that complained, the Antifa, right? You complain about everything. This isn't going to work. And we got a new system and blah, 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 blah. And this is all the problems that we have. And they just complain about everything. They can't accept anything. They can't, just none of it. Right. So where do you fall in that? Like you got to, like, this is where the term libertarian comes in, right? They go, well, I'm kind of centrist. I sit in the middle and I go, well, I agree with this and death penalty. Yeah. And, but gays are okay or whatever. Right. Like that's that middle road where they're going, kind of shrugging their shoulders, almost like neutrality. Right. Like almost like fucking Finland and those a-holes over there in Amsterdam and whatnot, like kind of like that. So I don't know. After all this last week, man, that JFK shit, I was like, damn, like that was literally the same thing that happened to our government last year. Like this coup, like having to accept the fact that there was a coup d'etat last year that just overthrew the government and put their, like, literally, like, dude, everything that people joke about, like, oh, and then all of a sudden the fucking Capitol has these gigantic walls around them, like a fucking fortress. Like all the stuff we joke about, that's fucking real, dude. That really happened. And like, if you're in denial that this wasn't a fucking government takeover, then you're an idiot. But that's what happened. And it was so systematic. Like even Donald Trump couldn't prevent it. That's kind of mind blowing right there alone. Like he did everything he could, and then in the end, he got backstabbed by his fucking vice president, just like fucking JFK,
Yeah.
just like fucking JFK.
That's a
Like
good
right,
point.
like so
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. Like I'm at this point where I switched my alignment. Right, like I always talk about the D&D, the Dungeons and Dragons alignment. And originally, I was this chaotic neutral, where I was like, oh, I'll side with whoever fucking pays me the most, right? And then, when I was, in the Trump era, I was like lawful good, man. I'm a good guy. I like will do the paperwork and like follow the rules. And now somehow I'm like chaotic evil. I'm just like I don't give a shit anymore. Like none of it fucking matters. Nihilism fucking rules. Nothing matters, dude. Like at all. So that's where I'm at. That's why my fucking what do you call it? My anxiety is up here. My depression is just like, like what the fuck do we do? Like what do? We just assimilate into that shit? I mean, accept that the government is corrupt and then be corrupt with it. But you can't go around saying that because that's socially unacceptable, right? Like people go, "Oh, you're corrupt." Well, yeah, I'm a corrupt guy. You just have to be corrupt.
Yeah, I
At
just
worst,
do what I followed the example, the model that was made for me by the government. If you want to talk about anxiety, V, and what turned me this last year, because I was the same way. I was very like, hey, let's cross the T's, let's dot the I's, let's do it right, and whatever. And let's not, whatever. I'm not going to go into great detail, but let's play by the rules. And what did that get me? Right? What we went through last year and what we're going through still to this day. And it wasn't until I had a panic attack, a very like debilitating panic attack actually, when I started thinking about how all these they're making all these rules, and it's still ongoing, right? They started making the rules with the masks, and they started saying, no, you have to socially distance. No, you can't go here unless you wear a mask. No, you can't do this unless you stand 6 feet away, and you can't do this. In order to go to be treated, you're going to have to be tested. We're going to have to test you, right? And all this stuff, and we're starting to see all this kind of corrupt activity. And I started to think about it, and I realized we are in a prison. Like that's what this became. There is no way around it. There is no loopholes. There are no ways that you can just live your life and say, I just want to be left alone. I want my kids to go to school. I want things to go back and just be normal, be the way that they were. And I don't want to have to make all these changes to my life in order to live in a normal way, or what used to be normal. I don't want to have to return to normal. I want it just to be normal again. And you guys have that power, but you're forcing us to do these nonsensical things. And I really started to realize, and as I wrapped my head around that, I realized I am powerless. And this is part of that claustrophobia. How the phobias kind of like all certain ones grouped together. There's one of the major umbrella phobias is the loss of control, and things from claustrophobia to what's a good one? Fear of sharks, just being afraid of sharks, or being afraid of the ocean. That it all falls under this loss of control, because in the ocean you are powerless because the ocean overpowers you, and many of the animals within the ocean can overpower you. You are out of your element. And when you're claustrophobic, you lose control of space. You don't have the ability to move around, so you've lost control. And I realized that that's what has happened to all of us during this pandemic. Claustrophobic or not, you have to start to realize that you have lost control, and you are part of that umbrellaed phobia. And when I started to think about how I am powerless against this push for a new world order, right? Or this change that they are forcing upon us. Wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart, constantly you got to be vaccinated. If you want to go anywhere, you have to be tested. You have to be vaccinated in order to do this, that, or the other. The vaccine passport, all this bullshit. I am powerless against that because I can't say no to. I mean, I can say no all day, and in fact, I did for the last year. But it doesn't mean anything if they say, Well, that doesn't mean anything to me. You still have to do it. You can say no all day long, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're going to get your way just because you say no. And when I started, specifically, I thought about my idiot governor who was implementing all these rules, and he was being given all this power, to these emergency powers, and he was able legally to do all these things and to change my life. So I lost control of my own life and my own family, and there was nothing that I could do. And it resulted in this panic attack that for like several days, I was just out. I couldn't do anything. And it's frustrating. And I think that actually carries over into the episode today. I think that's a good segue.
Yeah, really.
So I'll do my shot. We'll do the hellos to everybody. Hello in the chat to Sharon, J. Coop, Mike in Manitoba, Megabit, Conrad, Chad, Jurassic Weeb, Walter, and your best friend, I Love God. Also, Critter Me Timbers showed up after I wrote the list out. But welcome. Always a pleasure to have you here, Critter Me Timbers. She is the meme queen who we steal. A lot of our memes that we have in the Discord or whatever, I'll see it and I'll laugh, and then I'll look on Twitter and I'll see that all the other guys have liked Critter Me Timbers' post. I'm like, oh, that's where they got the friggin' meme or whatever. And then the shot. What are we choosing to, V? I chose last week, so you got to choose this time.
Let's toast to the unending. I don't know. The unending nightmare, dude.
The new normal.
Yeah, the new normal.
Delicious.
I'm all disgruntled. I'm all disgruntled. What is that? Moonshine?
Yeah. Peach
flavored. Paint thinner and shit?
No, peach flavored. But it does taste a little bit like paint thinner. That's what I love about moonshine, is it's just awful. It tastes awful. But it'll definitely fuck you up. Shiz will fluff you up, as they say.
Yeah.
And a very special happy birthday to Mrs. Manitoba. Apparently it is her birthday today, so we wanted to make sure that we said something. Mike got on to me.
Wife's name? Michelle? Is it Michelle Manitoba?
They're not like a sitcom.
Gotta be a man.
They're not a sitcom. They don't have similar names like Tia and Tamara or
Mindy Manitoba. Mindy in Manitoba.
Michelle in Manitoba. I like that one because that is kind of like the female equivalent, right? Of Michael, Michelle. We'll go with that.
It's got to be exotic. I like exotic. It's got to be like Minerva in Manitoba.
That's too many. It ends the same way. I don't like that. It doesn't flow right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's it.
What do we? So Minerva in Manitoba is where we're going
Minerva.
with?
Okay. That's a goddess. You should be, you should appreciate that. It's like a compliment, even, right? Minerva, isn't she like a Greek god or something?
I don't know. I don't know enough about mythology. I believe you.
Minerva is definitely something that has to do with gods, and I know that because in video games, it's a piece of armor from the gods. So it has to be. I'm assuming someone nerd out there correct me on this, or at least co-sign with me, so that we can prove that is true.
I'll agree with you just so that we can move on.
Okay, that works.
Critter Me Timbers, she said, as we were talking about assimilating and that, she said, but if we assimilate, are we really free? And it reminds me of that episode. Even while you were talking, too, it made me think of that episode of Rick and Morty where Unity, all those people were so bad off, right? You had the miners that one of them was a pedophile or whatever. One of them was a drug addict or whatever. But once Unity took over, they were all working towards this collective, which sounds great. It's like, oh, we turned this drug addict or this pedophile or this whatever into a productive member of society who is equally as respected as any other part of the machine. But, like, even the episode makes the point that they're not really free. They're subject to, they're not even them anymore, right? And that's the problem with assimilating into this this government plan to just turn
The
everybody
real
into.
problem, I think, is basing an entire government on an abstract ideal, like an ideal that, like, by definition, can only be defined by the person experiencing it. Like, whatever freedom is to me isn't freedom to you. You know what I mean? Like, my honest opinion is that we're not free, and you'll never be free. You're always a slave to something, whatever it may be. It's true. You could think that, but I assure you, even like this, here's how you're not free in the biggest, broadest scale. You are imprisoned on Earth. There is no escaping Earth unless you're like an astronaut, which in a rare case, like maybe you are, maybe we have an astronaut listening, then you are free to leave space, in which case you are imprisoned to our galaxy. Like, you'll never leave our galaxy, right? So in those two aspects on the broadest scale, you are not free. You are not, what do they say? You're not free to move about the universe. You are stuck on Earth.
You are not. You are a slave to this universe, which is like the greatest. Yeah, you are not free to move about the universe. I like that because that's
Free to move about it.
because we can't, and it makes me. I got to disagree with you a little bit because I think I'm in fact at least pretty confident that magicians can leave and maneuver about the universe, right?
Magicians, huh?
Yeah, like the occult practicing magicians.
Like
Not
David
like
Sanders.
I don't think Dave does it, but
Astral projection. Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about astral projection?
yeah, sure. I mean, that's one way to do it.
Is that what we're talking about?
I think if you really wanted to, no, what is it? What is it? Pigeon says on Mike Tyson's Mystery Team, where he's like, well, didn't she turn you into a pigeon? And he's like, well, I kind of think that would have just happened anyways. I kind of think that, like, if you really wanted to, you could will yourself into other parts of the universe. There would be a certain amount of magic and occultism and all that sort of stuff. I think you could do it, but at what cost, right? I don't know. I don't know what the cost is. But I think somebody could reasonably pull it off. But the problem is, you'll never, when you talk to those people, they'll seem so crazy that you just won't want, like, you'll have a hard time believing them. If somebody came up to you and legitimately traveled the cosmos using magic, and they told you about it, would you be like quick to believe them, or would you be more likely to be like,
I am skeptic. So if somebody came up to me and they said that they had traveled the cosmos, I might be like a little intrigued, but I'd have to judge, like, okay, we talk about this. You have to judge them based on their appearance. Like, if a guy wearing a suit and tie walks up to you and he says, I've traveled the cosmos, and he speaks like Morgan Freeman, you're going to probably go with him. You're going to go, holy shit, this guy knows what's up. He talks like Morgan Freeman. You wouldn't go with a guy that's voice sounds like Morgan Freeman.
No.
Okay, so then would you go with a guy that looked like he'd been smoking crack for like 6 weeks and like had a tinfoil hat on, and he was like, I just traveled the cosmos, Marty, and then was like, come with me. You're like, Marty?
Listen, I would, is the short answer.
Really?
And I've made this. I've made this.
Will Smith. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, yeah, all right, I get it, and I get why you say that, and I agree with you that I am more willing to trust somebody for professional sort of stuff if they're wearing a suit and tie. And for, like, if somebody came up to me and wanted to do my taxes and they were wearing a suit and tie, I'd be like, yeah. But if somebody came up to me and they looked like a homeless person and they were like their hair all scraggly and they were wearing like a ripped up t-shirt, I would say no. But on the flip side, it would be the opposite if somebody said, hey man, I travel the universe using magic. If it was a person in a suit, I would think that they were goofing on me. I think it was like punked or something, or like some kind of social experiment. But if it was a crazy guy comes running up to me and he's like, hey man, we gotta go, we gotta travel the cosmos using magic, I would be more inclined to believe that that person has traveled the cosmos because he's got bigger things going on than hygiene. All right. And I've also said this in the past. Uh, the further you are from spirituality, and that sort of stuff, the more crazy you get, right? So you can't be super intelligent and super spiritual, right?
Mm.
You can be kind of one, or you can be both, but one of them's going to be higher than the other, right? So like the people who are super spiritual, super crazy, right? Like their intelligence and their mental abilities kind of leave them. And then people who are very intelligent, you know, you've got like the doctors and the scientists who understand the physics and the laws of the universe, very smart, but not particularly spiritual, right? So I think there's a level of balance that comes from the soul versus the mind. And the sort of people who are absolutely batshit crazy, you know, they get locked away. They get put in the banana house, right? Or the nervous hospital. And I'd be curious to actually sit down and talk to them and find out what their experiences with God are, right? Like, what is yours? And by saying God, I mean like whatever spiritual entity that they ascribe to. I'd be curious to hear, because I think a lot of those guys do or are more receptive to that sort of interaction than, say, somebody who would wear a suit and tie and carry a briefcase. Which is why I'd be more willing to go with the guy who dresses like, you know, who just looks like shit versus the guy who looks like a professional. Granted, the guy who looks like a professional will probably make sure I got there safe and abide by all sorts of OSHA codes and shit. But the guy who's crazy, I know he's going to get me there in the most expeditious possible way. And we're going to see some crazy stuff along the way. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I guess what it comes down to is you can't really know what type of person is going to show up and take you through space with his magic powers. There's no way to know what that person is going to look like. And like when you think of it like that, like let's break that down. When you think of it like that, isn't that the essence of religion? Like which God is going to help me traverse the cosmos, right? Which being of magic or spirituality or whatever your nomenclature is for that, whether the demons or the angels or the aliens take me through space, you're not gonna know what they look like. It could be Doctor Who. There could be a real Doctor Who out there, or Doctor Strange, or Morty, or Rick and Morty. Who knows? It could just happen.
Would you go with some? So let me ask you this, since we're not going to talk about the topic that we had planned for tonight. This is I'm just going to go ahead and close out of those notes, but just in case you plan on doing it this week, don't go get vaccinated, because that was what we were going to talk about today. We're going to try to tell you why you shouldn't go get vaccinated. Next week we'll tell you exactly why you shouldn't get vaccinated, so hold off until at least next week before you go get vaccinated. So my
Any
question,
of them are chomping a bit to get the vaccine.
Yeah,
they're like, I'm going to get it tomorrow.
They have schedule. It's on the schedule. They're supposed to go, and they're like, well, I was kind of hoping that somebody would talk me out of it. And then meanwhile, we're just like, so would you travel the cosmos with a crazy guy? So that's my question to you, though. So let's just say you said you would prefer to go with a professional looking guy. Let's say the one type of person, somebody comes up to you and their approach is, you trust them at a glance. They present themselves in a way that you trust, that you would be willing to entertain, and they simply tell you, hey, we gotta go. We're gonna travel the cosmos using magic, and we're gonna and we're gonna go see some crazy stuff. Are you in? And they extend their hand. Do you go with them?
Well, honestly, as a former drug addict, if somebody says that phrase to me, I usually have to go, no, man, I don't do cocaine anymore. I don't do that anymore. But if they were able to prove to me in that moment that they could actually do that, or at least give me some idea that it was possible. Like all they needs to be is an intrigue, right? Like that's what it comes down to. Like for me, with like religion and believing any like paranormal stuff, is just give me something. Like make fire with your hands without using a lighter or something, or do something magical. Just like that would be my shtick, right? Is they'd go, well, I'm gonna take you through space using magic, and I'd go, oh, you know some magic, do you? Well, show me some magic. And if he did like a little card trick, I'd be like, you know what? I've seen that before, dude, and I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. But if he did some like real magical shit, like, I don't know, like turned a statue into ice or something, like, like summoned down the elements. You know what I'm saying here? Like called forth a whirlwind or something. Like, then I might be like, okay, all right, well, let's do this. But, I'm not going to just go follow some random dude that could or could not be a drug dealer, you
So
know?
if he was able to prove to you that he was in fact magical, you would you would you would go, is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me, dude? I have wanderlust. We've talked about this before. Adventure, I will jump on an adventure if it sounds cool. And that, if he's telling the truth and I can magically travel the cosmos, that sounds like a badass fucking Han Solo space dandy fucking journey. And I'm down. I'm totally down. We will throw down mighty all over the universe, just tearing ass.
Megabit Megabit says, I would say okay, but no gay stuff. And my question, well, like my big issue is like I feel like that sort of proposal is it often precedes people waking up in a bathtub full of ice with their kidneys
Yeah.
missing. You know what I
It's like
mean?
it's playful, but it might be perceived as like, oh, but he's serious, but he's just being playful, like coy. It's supposed to be playful, but it ends up sounding coy, and then you end up, like you said, in a bathtub or face down, ass up on the bed with a probe coming out of the beehole. You don't want that, I assure you. See, and then you have all these other things to worry about. Like this is like the concern, right? Like you go with this space magic man, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe you think he's a space magic man because he did magic, but then it just turns out he's the fucking CIA and he's got you banging hookers on LSD, testing you for fucking, coronavirus or some shit. And that's what you perceive to be traveling the cosmos with magic, is it's really just drugs. Like that could happen too. That's a possibility.
So
You
it was
can't
all
rule
a
it out.
trick. Yeah.
You could end up traveling the cosmos. That's a possibility. This guy, this magician, you could travel the cosmos with him. But if it's not, there's always the chance that, there's so many options that it could be, you know?
Like what else?
Like what else? I don't know. What else could it be? I don't know. Traveling the cosmos with a magician. Like there are so many things that could be. It's like innuendo. It could be one of those sex innuendos that
Yeah.
James Pregler is always throwing out. Our
Oh,
boy Jimmy,
yeah.
traveling
Traveling.
the cosmos. Some guy comes up to you and he's kind of funky looking and he says, "Hey, you want to travel the cosmos with magic?" That could mean like putting cocaine on your wiener and then letting him like sniff it off or something.
That's
Like
called
do
a
a line
schneef.
off your.
No,
Yeah.
that's called a schneef. When you
Oh,
do a
see.
line off of
So
a boner. Yeah.
you're familiar with this one, I take it.
Well, yeah. Who isn't? Who hasn't schneefed a line of coke off of, another man's
Me.
erection? That's from Letterkenny. It's actually that's that show that I keep trying to get you to watch. Uh, so what? So I'm curious because I'm thinking the. I was watching. I had to do this big project for my ethnographic study, and I had to watch a series of sermons from a church that I've never been to. I had to pick one and then watch some sermons and then and do this very elaborate project about them. But one of the things was I had to watch some of their sermons, and they were in the middle of a series about encounters with Jesus, right? And it got me to thinking about, and this comes up, this is not like the first time that has come up to me. Uh, but as I was thinking, it was kind of talking about how Jesus was just some guy at the time, and he would go up to people and he would have this profound effect on them. over the course of their conversation or their interaction or the encounter. But in reality, Jesus, he just looked like some guy, and nobody could really tell him. It's not like he was glowing or anything, or it's not like he had some kind of sign that told people, hey, this is in fact, most of the people didn't believe that he was the Son of God and that he was anything special. It was just, they thought he was a really good teacher. Even to this day, the Islamic faith is built on this concept of like Jesus was just a prophet. He was just, there was nothing deity about him. So even as you read through the New Testament, it even talks about how the people who encountered him didn't really see anything special about him, and he just had this presence about him that convinced. For instance, the brothers Thunder, right? John and his brother. They were just on the boat, and Jesus came along and said, hey, come on, let's go, follow me. And they did. They just dropped everything, they followed him. And like, what would compel them to do such a thing? So I think he has like this, my theory is that he has this presence about him that makes you feel a certain way that you can just trust automatically, or you know something good is going to happen if you do that. And I think that was part of it. But I think about in modern times, like, what if, if we were approached by in modern times by a man who fit every description of Jesus, just like a really great teacher, really knowledgeable, could do magic tricks and shit, and perhaps very illusion, like was able to perform these illusions or whatever, assuming, and I'm calling them illusions as like a contrast to the miracles, right? But a lot of people saw them as illusions, right? So if we saw somebody performing legitimate miracles, and we just attributed them to illusions, because how many times have you seen a magician do something where you're like, I have no idea how he did that, but I can only assume that it's an illusion, right? And that he's just a skilled magician. What if we saw somebody who came up to us and was speaking very prophetically and was able to perform miracles? Would we, like, what would it take for us to even believe that they were in fact miracles and not illusions? And like, if they were telling us, hey, let's travel the cosmos using magic, right? You kind of already said that there has to be something about him and he has to prove it and he has to do all this stuff. Makes me wonder about, like, how many crazy people have we encountered who were in some way, like, perhaps angels, perhaps demons, perhaps who knows what, but we just dismiss them because we're not used to that, or we're just, whatever. It just we ignore them. I spoke last week about how, like, the retarded can often go undetected, right? The daywalkers. They can go undetected because we tune them out. We do the same thing with crazy people, right? When you see a crazy person on the corner talking about the end is nigh or whatever, and they're doing
Gingers,
this.
man.
Yeah.
Gingers. If anything has a chance to be like demons or aliens or angels, it's got to be gingers, because those are the ones that you're right. You avoid looking at them. They look weird, so you're like, oh, don't look at the gingers. But I don't know. I like what you said about miracles versus illusions. That's good. That's a good contrast, because it breaks it down to the connotation of the term, right? Like, we've got illusions that are trickery and they're kind of for entertaining, but miracles are like something that like curing the blind. Like, wasn't that something Jesus did? Is he like made this blind guy see, and it was like this huge thing. Now, anybody could go back and go, well, he was probably just had some guy there that he was like, come up here and you're going to pretend that you're blind. And then, like, that's debunking the trick, right? However, imagine you're that guy, right? You're his buddy, and you've known him this whole time, and you're like, this dude is blind as a fucking bat. Like, he walked into the wall like 6 times today already. Like, he can't see shit, right? And then you hear about this dude that can like heal the blind, like has done this before. Like, he's done it before. Don't worry, we'll just go see him. And you go, and the dude, puts his hands over the guy's eyes and just says, be healed. And boom, your brother or your homie or whoever he is to you can see now. Like, that is a fucking miracle. That's the definition right there of a miracle. Holy shit, this dude can see. You just cured my leprosy. My limbs aren't falling off anymore. Didn't he brought Lazarus back from the dead?
Yeah.
Like that's a fucking miracle. Like that's the definition, right? So if that were to happen, like if we saw a dude, and I'll tell you straight up, if I met a dude that could perform miracles, I would follow him until the day I died. But I need to see it. I need to see it for myself. That's all I'm saying.
But how do you, who you are now, like you said, you've already cast a doubt on the blind guy, right? And I mean, the stories of the blind and the lame and all them, they were like known layabouts, like known problems in the community. Like, oh, here's this fucking guy in the road. He's like a blemish. We don't want Jesus to see this guy as we're walking into town. But then, you know, he crawls over and touches Jesus's the hem of his garments and all that, and that's how he's able to see. So like people knew that these people were blind. So that was like how people were like, holy shit, like he did do a miracle. Like or when they healed the, like you said, the homies, they brought that guy in, he broke through the roof and Jesus healed him and he picked up his shit and he walked away. Like these were people who knew that they were miracles. But then you think about like now, and as you said, you kind of cast a doubt on that. Like, oh, maybe it was just like some kind of trickery.
Yeah, you could debunk it. Right? Yeah.
But how do
I get what
you
you're saying.
like now? It's hard to trust anybody, right? Like because we know that there's certainly if you watch it on TV, you automatically assume well, or on a YouTube video, you're like, well, they probably did some camera tricks or whatever. But even if you saw it in person, I love going to magicians. I love watching magicians. That's like if you want to see me turn into a kid again, just come with me to a magic show, right? Because I can watch magicians all day, and I'll just sit and giggle and laugh like a little kid again. And I purposely don't like to know how tricks work because I like that element, right? But if I saw someone doing magic tricks that there's just no, and I'll even try to pick them apart in my head, right? And see if I can, because if I can figure it out, then they're not a very good magician. Because I watch magic shows all the time. But if they can do one that I just cannot figure out, that to me is miraculous, right? Sort of like in a broad definition. So what do you categorize as a difference between potentially fraudulent illusion and miraculous? Like, where is your line in the sand? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's I already covered that. Is the fact that it is an act of goodness to heal somebody, right? Like if you're just entertaining, like you're going, oh, you do that, da 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 da
No,
da
no,
da da.
but
The
hear me
fingers.
out. Let me save. I just want to save you from going into a whole thing. They could bring on somebody, like you said, you casted the doubt yourself, saying they could have brought in
Right,
somebody and
right.
pretended, right? And that could have fooled you. You could have been like, holy shit, that guy was blind. I mean, you can watch Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman and be like, that is a blind guy. He's playing a very good blind person. If they bring in somebody who can play a very good blind person and convince you that, oh, this guy is blind, and then all of a sudden homeboy spits in his hand and wipes it on his eyes, and then all of a sudden the guy can see because he was not really blind to begin with. Like, that seems miraculous, but that's kind of like a fraudulent thing. Like, what would it have to be for you to be like, there is no way that this guy is not a true, like, truly, like, a deity, right? Like,
I get what you're
you know what I'm
saying now.
saying?
I get what you're asking. Yeah, I think well, first of all, I would not believe somebody that just showed up and said, "Yeah, this guy was blind and now he's not." I'd be like, "Well, that's cool, but I didn't see it happen. I don't know this guy. He couldn't have not been blind when I started there." So I wouldn't have bought that. But for me, it would have to be like a limb getting put back on.
Okay.
Like, here's your arm, like, and then it just melds to his body. Like, it would have to be something like that, or bringing him back from the dead. Like, I don't know, even then, like you could fake that too, right?
Yeah.
Even like putting an arm back on a person, that's just what the whole body in half gag is, right?
Yeah.
You saw the lady in half and now they're back together. You know, there's always an illusion that you can perform. What do they call it? Sleight of hand, right? You get the audience looking one way, and then you perform something over here. And for that split second, they didn't see it. And that's the hand is quicker than the eye. That's all there is to it, right? So when we're comparing magic to like miraculous things, I guess what it comes down to is it has to be something so miraculous that it's just like there's no way, right? Which with science and like mirrors and all this shit, there's a way to do it. There's a way to make it, happen, even if it's fake, right? So, yeah, the only way for me to actually believe it is if it was somebody I knew and I knew their condition and they were healed. That's the only way. Like that, I took like my, whatever cousin in his wheelchair to this magician and was like, look, he hasn't been able to walk for decades. He's got fibromyalgia. He's got atrophy. He can't do nothing. And the dude was just like, now get up and walk. And then he got up and did like the moonwalk. Then I'd be like, holy shit, that is amazing. That would blow my mind. That would, yeah, it would have to be something like that. Yeah. I'd have to know the person. But if I didn't know them, then I would never believe it, ever.
So if a prophet, so imagine this, right? This prophet comes and shows up and they do this, they're going from town to town or whatever, or like they have like an international tour, right? And they're going to all these different major metropolitan areas, and you could go visit him. The only certain people, I mean, he can't sit there and just be doing miracles constantly all day long, right? Because he just,
why not?
I don't know. I mean, there's only so much time in the day. You can't bring every cripple to.
Well, why not?
Because and if we want to get theological, I can
Isn't
tell
that
you
the whole
why.
point of it, though? Isn't that the whole point of a
If
miracle? Is to like just keep doing that. Like if you can perform miracles, then it is your duty. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a magician or Jesus. If you have the ability to like bring people back to life and like give them their eyesight back, then like it's your duty. Like if I was president and somebody like that existed, I would put them under our control and make them start doing that for people. That's what I would do. And I feel like people would agree with that. They'd go, yeah, let's cure this person's cancer. My poor daughter, she's 6 years old. She has leukemia. Well, let's go get that magician with the power to cure, right? I guess that's my argument for why didn't you keep doing it, Jesus? Why didn't you just keep doing that, like curing people?
Because the Jews killed him. Is why is one of the answers.
Oh, we're blaming the Jews now.
Yeah, hold on.
The Jews. It's not true. You can blame the Jews all you want. You and I both know that was his destiny. No, he was supposed to die. So it didn't matter if it was the Jews or the Romans or Pontius Pilate selling him out. He was supposed to die on that cross, right?
And you know what's funny to me is
circular
I've always
circular logic.
No, and I agree with you. Because it makes me wonder, like when people talk about how Judas was a terrible person, right? And how whatever, Judas is burning in hell and this and I was like, well, Judas, he played a very critical part in the prophecy. Like this was something that was going to happen anyways, and he was kind of predestined. And I think that's where the Calvinists get into this whole concept of predestination and everything, that everything is already written and whatever. I think it's a little more complicated than that, but anyways, I think yes, when I blame the Jews, it was mostly in jest, but it is true. It is true. The Sanhedrin, they were very upset with. It was going to happen, like Pigeon said. I think it would have happened either way. If not the Jews, it would have been the who knows who it could. It could have been the carpenter union for all we know. It would have been somebody, but it just so happened to be the Jews in the Sanhedrin, and they were upset because he was challenging their the Pharisee belief and all that shit, and he was challenging the leaders of the temple, and people were kind of like turning away from them and being like, hey, why are we having to do all this when Jesus said that you can do that, when this rabbi over here says that we don't have to, and so obviously they got upset. There was a certain amount of vanity and jealousy that went into it, and so yes, the Jews were ultimately responsible for his death in this particular timeline. That's how it played out.
In the multiverse.
You're right, right. And there are, who knows? The other multiverses, maybe it was the Carpenters Union who killed Jesus because, for whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but it was going to happen regardless. He was going to end up getting crucified so that he could, wash away the sins. But, forget where I was going with that. I had a really funny joke, too, lined up.
Yeah.
Anyways, people talking about how Judas was the bad guy. Why? Like, he was a victim of circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Isn't the devil the bad guy, anyways?
I
Right?
don't
Isn't the
know.
devil bad guy?
Everybody's the bad guy. Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump was the one who killed Jesus.
Well, I thought we're not bad guys. Like we're like I've been watching Axe Cop, and I've been dying to get to a point where I can actually reference Axe Cop because I love this show right now. But one of the things that I love about this show, right, and it comes from the mind of a 5-year-old, right? A 5-year-old kid tells the stories while his 20-year-old or 30-year-old brother draws it forth. So they're very innocent. And what I love about it, one of the things that's this common theme among the show is that there's no like political office or like group of whatever. It's just bad guys and good guys. And that's the term. They were bad guys, so I killed them, right? That's what he does. He kills bad guys, which is like such an innocent, like childlike way of thinking. But it's kind of funny because like when you start watching that show, right, as through the eyes of a child, which you're doing watching the show, you're going, holy shit, like all this stuff that I know about society and like all the fucking policies and politics of the world, like my whole view is so skewed because of what's it called? What's the term that I'm looking for? Programming. Programming. Because I'm programmed to think there's all these things out there that have negative whatever, right? Like the opinion of good and bad. Like what I think is bad, you might not think is bad, and what I think is good, you might not think is good, and so forth throughout like all of the continents, right? Like the Al Qaeda, they think just being American is bad, right? And that's bad to them, and so they kill the bad guy, right? And so here it is in this kid's view that's just good guys and bad guys, right? And so who gets to decide that, right? It's us, right? The common interest of the people. We get together and we have these quorums and groups and we go, well, that's wrong. And so we need to make a law that nobody does that, right? And that's all comes down to that, right? And then you go to religion and it's something similar, right? You have this hierarchy of people throughout the ages. And then, God, the big one that just says, you can't do that, dude. And boom, it's in law, right? And so we are programmed to know these things are good or bad, right? When in actuality, it's really just judgment, right? This is my chaotic evil coming out. In the absence of morality, everything is okay. Like everything is allowed. Like you could just do whatever. I'm not saying to do that. By no means am I saying go be evil or whatever. I'm just saying that we put that inhibitor on ourselves. And I don't know, in some kind of like skewed way of thinking, like, is that hindering our progress? Like adhering to all these taboos, right? Like you're not allowed to clone babies and harvest their organs or their, whatever, their, what are those things, stem cells, so we can't really further research into our biology because there's this taboo on it. Or you can't splice genes because that's playing God and there's a taboo and there's all these things, right? That we go, no, that's wrong. Or you can't kill an entire race of. I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm just
I'm
kidding.
with you on that one now. Like I'm with you all of a sudden.
Really?
With the last part. No, I think so. So no, I got into an argument recently with somebody on the internet about this because that's what I do, right? I get into arguments on the internet. We're talking about good. What is good? And who gets to define good?
Right.
And because he was talking about, well, in the Bible it says that slavery is okay, and it says that he was like pulling up these really obscure things from the Old Testament, so like
Of
not even
course.
applicable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and oh, it's okay to rape somebody, right? Well, it's good. And I said, well, no. So who defines what is good? Well, we do. I'm like, what if we defined it wrong? Like, why do we get to decide what is good, right? So even in the New Testament, right? Jesus says, James Pregler. By the way, welcome to the chat, James Pregler, Justin Walker, and Buzz Busby. James says, "V, you're starting to sound like Bill Gates." With
Well,
and I wish we could have talked about that today because that was the topic today. And I have a lot of stuff about Bill Gates and his genocidal tendencies. But I say we don't get to decide what's good, because even in the New Testament, when somebody came up to Jesus and said, "Good teacher," and Jesus said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 stop the bus. Uh, Why do you call me good teacher? No one is good but the Father," right? So like whatever our preconceived notion of what is good is wrong, because even Jesus was like, "Well, I'm not good." Like that's so whatever is good, I think it has to do more with the greater good rather than and perhaps whatever part of God's plan is, that's what is good. So we don't get to determine what is good. And if wiping out the Palestinians is part of the plan, then that's good, right? If
We have
wiping
to,
out
like, we have to though. Like, okay, I get
whatever
what
it
you're saying.
is,
Like, I
it's
get what
we
you're
don't get to
saying.
decide what is good, especially if what is good, if good, if part of the plan that is good involves me uh, being burnt to death, like on a yeah, on a pike or something, then so be it. Like I won't like that, but if for some reason it is part of the plan and that what is supposed to be good for the greater
Is
good, then
is
that's
that
what it has to be. And I, like I said, I won't consider that good, but and I'm
is
sure
that what you imagine hell is? You on a pike
no,
burning for all eternity?
no, I imagine it's far more complex than that. Like, um, I don't
But
know
I
what I would describe hell as, but I would say that it's something that even like I can't even comprehend. Like the descriptions of hell that I have read from the lost scriptures, and some of the stuff that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that from canon or from books that wasn't included in canon, it is not like a pleasant place. Obviously, like I would describe it. I would say that Dante Alighieri's depiction of it in Inferno is probably somewhat realistic based on what I've read from the Lost Scriptures and the theology of Thomas Aquinas, one of the early church fathers. And I mean, you know how I feel about the church fathers and shit, but
but
yeah, I think I
I
think that
want to
that's
get
fine.
back to what you were saying earlier though. Like
Well, it
we have
depends.
to define good and bad. Like we have to as a society. And that's just so that we don't have anarchy and people aren't killing each other. And so because of these things, like obviously, yes, the Bible is left there as for however many generations or hundreds and hundreds of years of information for us on how to act. Right? Sure, there's a kind of a guideline on there. I'll agree. There absolutely is. Like here, even just the simple golden rule is enough, right? Like that's enough to say that tells you like how you should live as a human being, right? That's kind of a good way to do it. But there are some things that were left out like of the Bible, like things that we did not like. It's hard to like say that because this like Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, and you go, did we leave anything out back then? Like, did we not know that this would happen? And then you go, well, God is the one that was in charge of the Bible getting written, so why would He leave anything out? Like to us, like the future, right? 2021, here we are with fucking flying cars and microwaves and shit. Like, did he know that there was going to be like furry rape going on? Like, did he not, or like cannibalism?
Well,
Like
that's what
cannibalism,
falls
dude.
under like sexual immorality. When you talk about furries and homosexuality and the tranny stuff, I think that all falls under sexual immorality. I mean, they could have sat there, and I'm sure it never came up specifically. Like, hey, you can't run around and talk about your fur cock or whatever and pretend to be a dog and have sex with dogs or whatever. Like, I mean, these were things. Having sex with animals was a thing that was addressed in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, Paul was very just like, hey, so let me clarify: sexual immorality, don't do that. And then and then people have this thing where all of a sudden they're like, well, he wasn't talking about homosexuals, even though he like explicitly said men who have lust for other men and women who lust for other women. But like sexual immorality, I think, is a very broad category, right? Like, don't dress up in a what are you doing in a fursuit if not when you're having sex with another man or even another woman, is that somebody that you're married to? No, then it's sexual immorality, regardless of whether it's with a fur cock or not. It's sexual
But
immorality.
if the law is going to be like vague like that, then we should be entitled to like defense. You know what I mean? Like getting a like if I get to heaven and he's like, okay, we're not letting you in based on like something that wasn't written in the Bible and you had to kind of just know fell under that bracket, then I'm gonna like I always say, I'm gonna get in touch with the manager, get me a fucking angel lawyer or something because I wasn't informed. No one told me that wasn't written, right?
Like what?
Like you mean to tell me that God, the omnipotent, omniscient one, didn't have the foresight to go, and also no furries. Like, also, that's not that you don't know what that is now, but I assure you, in 2021, you will know what a furry is. Like that to me doesn't make sense. That to me is like, well, then it's okay. Like you'll still go to heaven if you're a furry, because he didn't clarify that you can't be a furry. There's no scripture that says you can't dress up like an animal and bang other people dressed up like animals.
Well, it
Because
says no
let's be honest,
sexual immorality. You
but
can
is
dress
that
up like
immoral?
an animal all day long.
Is
That's
that
fine.
immoral? Is dressing up like is being a furry immoral? Like I make fun of them and I'll talk shit, but as a man and a woman who love each other very much, dressing up like an animal and banging each other, is that really immoral?
Well, according to the New Testament, yeah.
Does it
Specific.
specify furries? Does it
No,
specify?
no, but that's what I'm saying. If you want to dress up like an animal and go about your day, that's not a sin, right? But if you dress up like an animal and you have sex with somebody who's not your wife or your spouse or whatever, well, let's just clarify that is not your wife if you are a man or your husband if you are a woman. If you have sex with somebody dressed up as a furry or as a dog or a furkin or whatever, like whatever your character is, that still falls under sexual immorality. You can dress up like an animal. So let's say if you want to have sex with somebody who is your spouse and you want to dress up like an animal or you want to dress up like a robot or you want to dress up like a bookshelf, that's fine if it's your spouse. That's not sexually immoral. If you do, if you don't dress up like anything and you have sex with somebody who is not your wife or if you are a man or if you have sex with a man who is not, if you are a female, who is not your husband, then that is sexually immoral. So that's the whole category. It's like sexual immorality is a pretty broad category, but Paul actually specifically like talks about homosexuality because that was a problem in Rome. So when he wrote his letter to Rome,
let's backpedal here for a
sure,
second.
sure.
Let's backpedal. What you're telling me essentially is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the only moral way of having sex is with your wife. Like you're never allowed to have sex with anybody else unless they're your wife.
Correct.
Really?
Yeah. Sex outside of marriage is considered sexually immoral.
And not like having sex before you're married that's horrible too, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is like outside of marriage, if you are not married, that is sexually immoral.
Well, I guess the good thing is that God forgives, right?
It's already been forgiven. Is the
Most
thing.
of us have done that.
Yeah, no, and that's the
The
thing.
fact of the matter is that furries can go to heaven. If you're a furry, you can go to heaven.
Correct.
And pedophiles too.
Correct.
And child rapists and murderers and
former
all those
child
people.
rapists. Yeah.
All it takes is just a little. I'm sorry, boss. I'm sorry, boss.
It's more
really,
to it than that.
And really mean it.
Every time we talk about this, every time, I keep telling you, repentance is not just oh, I'm sorry, or forgive me, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's not just that. Repentance, to its core meaning, to its original roots of the word, means a change in your lifestyle. So, your sin is forgiven. Subsequent sinning without the attempt to change that particular attitude or that particular thing, that's a problem, okay? Repentance is only repentance when you change or make that change or try to make that change. Because it's very clear in the New Testament that You're humans. You fail. You suck. It's not going to be easy. You're going to constantly struggle with it. Every day you will fall short of the glory of God, but your sins are forgiven. You just need to try. You need to keep trying. Try to be better. Repent. Move away from sin. And I forget who I talked to this about recently, but the idea of sin is like, just imagine it as dog shit, right? And I think I talked to you about this, as a matter of fact. It's like dog shit, right? You would go, say adultery is dog shit, okay? You go outside and you pick it up and you're like, wow, this is awful. Like, I don't know why I picked this up. Wipe my hands. Or maybe you pick it up and you put it down. You go and you wash your hands or whatever, and you're like, that was not something that I want to experience again. You might do it again, though, but you're going to try to avoid it, right? And then over time, you're no longer going to pick up dog shit because you're like, this is not something that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to be picking up dog shit. And then that's adultery, right? Now, one day, you might encounter cat shit, right? And you might say, what is this? You pick it up. Now, cat shit is, I don't know, stealing, right? You're not supposed to steal. Or let's just say dishonoring your mother and father. Let's just call it that. So cat shit is dishonoring your mother and father. You pick it up and you're like, oh, this is kind of like the dog shit, right? I shouldn't be touching this. You go wash your hands and you try not to ever touch cat shit again either. And eventually you realize, wow, the bird shit. Oh, that's wanting or jealousy, right? That's wanting, coveting your neighbor's stuff, right? So you're like, I don't want that either. And eventually you just grow to where you're like, I just don't want to encounter any shit at all. Like, I would rather not touch any of this. And you find ways of avoiding touching, stepping in, picking up, tasting any kind of shit.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but your analogy is all wrong.
No, okay, let's hear it. Let's hear
your analogy is wrong is because you painted sin as shit. And that's the problem with sin is this, and this goes back to our conversation earlier, like the definition of what's good and evil, right? Who gets to define that, right? Like, okay, like in the Bible, you can't be immoral, right? But I've had sex, and I assure you, that is good. Sex is good. I enjoy it. It can't be a bad thing. There's no way. When I have sex with a woman, especially a beautiful one, I'm usually thinking there's no way this can be a bad thing. Now, that's just like in the most like normal context possible. Two consenting adults having sex. Now take a child molester banging a child and going, my God, how can this be evil? This is so amazing. This is the best. Like you have, like Louis C.K. has a joke, like the way that pedophiles are treated in prison, like it has to be really good because they know that they're risking going to jail and getting like their ass beat by some prison rapist, right? So my point is this, is like when you say picking up shit and you go, oh, I don't want shit on my hands, that's not how it works. You have sex with a hooker or you have sex with like a hot chick and you go, huh, that was pretty good. I know it's wrong because people tell me that all the time, but that was pretty good. That was pretty good. And I probably shouldn't do it again. And that's the thing with all things that we enjoy. That's why I go to the hedonism is like, just do what you enjoy, right? Like just, if you like it and it feels good, then do it. And it's hard for me not to advocate that because there are some things where it's like, well, if you enjoy it, what's wrong with that? You're not hurting anybody or whatever, right? Even with this gay crap, like I go, you know what? I don't accept it and I don't like being around like gay people or homosexuals, but it doesn't affect me. It really doesn't in any way. Two guys banging each other, whatever, man. Go do that in your own time as long as I don't have to like watch it. You know what I mean? Like whatever. There's nobody getting hurt in that instance, right? Even I have to concede that. Well, I mean, somebody's getting hurt in the people. But I mean, my point is this, is like all these things were defined by the Bible that were good and bad. And we take that as like gospel, right? Funny pun, that's just what's good and evil. But we really don't know. We really don't know because there's like books out there and laws and politics that all say what's right and wrong. Well, we have to fight for this country because they're being oppressed by blah 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 blah, and because we're programmed by like movies and video games and books and everything that tells us, well, you don't want to be a bully, or you don't want to be this, or you don't want to be that, that's good, right? But then you have the same like polar opposite conditioning in these third world countries where they're going, no, TV is bad and all these things are bad and it's evil and Americans are evil, and that's their conditioning. They're conditioned to think that. And it's funny, I get into this argument with my dad a lot because he's like, he doesn't understand that, like being programmed. And like, I do, like, we are programmed, like, man, like marketing, like, dude, I took one marketing class when I was in college, and it was like it was like the blinders came off, and I was like, holy shit, we are being brainwashed at every turn. There is propaganda, there is like marketing everywhere you look, dude, and you don't even realize it. Like the fact that we have a cell phone that literally like markets to you like by the second is like insane. And when you think about that, like on this global scale, like how free are we, right? Like goes back to what Critter said, like how free are we really? All that stuff. I don't know. It's hard for me to get behind morality in general, even if it's coming from such a spiritual and like innocent and goodness, like even something that I would argue is good, right? Even I agree, like, yeah, killing people and rape and all that stuff is bad. Maybe that's because I'm programmed, or maybe because I don't like to see other people get hurt. Who knows, really? There's really no determining what that reason is. But what it comes down to is it's all based on the definition of what good and evil is in the eyes of whoever is in control. That's what it comes down to. That's what I'm staying with, and I'm sticking to it.
So okay, no, and that's fine. And I moving on. No, I'm just kidding. Like I just totally ignore everything that you just said. All right, fuck all that. No, so I'm gonna argue with you because actually Jordan beat me to it in the chat.
Isn't that why we come to this thing, is so that we can argue?
Yeah, pretty much. Because normally, like throughout the week, we're just like doing poop and fart jokes, and now we've like taken our debates to the show. So would you say, because Jordan Davis says here in the chat, unironically, TV is bad, and I can agree with that. When you talk about what is good and what is bad, and this is kind of where objectively I try to look at stuff, right? Because I'm an objective guy. I'm subjective for the most part, but when I'm looking at like the arguments like this, I try to be objective because I can sit here and I can make the argument for one or the other. I can agree with you that my analogy is bad, with it being, sin at using shit for sin. I would say it's good in that we are supposed to abhor sin, right? We're supposed to not like it. We're supposed to try to avoid it. And that's that part of the analogy. But like you said, sin is great. It's a lot of fun. There's so many things that we are not supposed to do that are explicitly like they tell us not to do them in the Bible, right? And they clarify, hey, you're not supposed to do this. This is how you're supposed to live. And I've made this argument in the past. A lot of these things are, I think, even if you're not religious, a lot of these things are just good rules to live by for other reasons, right? So when you talk about, and I wanted to pick on you when you were talking, but you were kind of on a tangent, right? And I didn't want to interrupt you.
Raising my fist, yeah.
Right. When you said if it feels good, do it. And if it feels good and I don't have to see it and it doesn't hurt anybody, or I guess your argument was if it feels good, do it, right?
Well, it's right. Hedonism.
So obviously, pedophiles think that there's something to be said for having sex with kids, right? There's clearly some kind of sexual gratification that comes from that, whether or not. I mean, it's hurting somebody. It's hurting the child, right? It's both all across the board, physically, psychologically, emotionally, everything. It's affecting them in a great deal across the board. But for the pedophile, it's great. It's sexually gratifying. It makes them feel. I'm sure it's mentally stimulating in that, or psychologically stimulating in this power, this feeling of control and power. So it's great for them, but it hurts somebody, right? And I think we can all agree with that. Like, there's no denying that there's no good that comes out of pedophilia. But to the pedophile, it feels good. Hedonism would say that that's okay. regardless of the fact that everybody else in the known universe is disgusted by pedophilia, right? Um,
Well, and
so,
I don't like jump into the camp of pedophilia.
all right, hold
I'm
on.
not
I
gonna
want to
like,
hear
but I
this.
feel obligated, since we're doing this contrarian thing. I feel obligated to push back a little bit, right? Like just a little bit. Like I'm not going to advocate for pedophilia at all. Like let's be clear. I think that's wrong, and I think that it does mess up kids. But let's consider anomalies for a second. Let's imagine there is a child, we'll say a 6-year-old boy that's getting raped by his uncle or something, and it turns out he likes it. It's like he just all of a sudden realizes, wow, this is what I like. And he grows up like that's what he likes, is being a pedophile too. And next thing you know, it's like this chain of pedophiles that all like being pedophiles. Like, who really knows? Like, you talk about this kid and how it's a horrible whatever on that kid. And as normally it would be, right? That we all assume that's a bad thing. We all say that's a bad thing. But there's always that rare instance where it's not. And that kid is totally fine with it. And he grows up to be a homosexual that goes to drag queens, and like hangs out at bars and bangs other dudes. Like it's just totally normal. Like, yes, I agree that like sex with minors is wrong. Minors having sex is wrong. I agree with that. I absolutely do. That's just because I find it disgusting and offensive. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's wrong because I don't have the really authority to say what's right and wrong. I mean, who am I, right? I
Who
didn't write a
does?
Bible, right? I didn't write a Bible, right? So my point is this, is like you can sit in judgment of whoever you want and say, "Hey, that's wrong. That's wrong what you did." But somebody else is going to sit in judgment of you. And isn't that what, and now let me throw your scripture at you. Isn't that what God, Jesus himself said? If you are without sin, cast the first stone. And you can't. So really, what can you sit here and go, say, fuck it, go live your life, do whatever you want. It doesn't bother me. I'm going to live my life how I want. I know
Judge
that's not what
not,
he was going for when he said that.
judge not, lest ye be judged. I think
Yeah.
that there's something to be said. There's like a caveat where they were like, except child molesters. Like, by all means, judge the shit out of them.
But
But
shouldn't
no,
that
no, no.
have been in the Bible? Shouldn't he have
Shouldn't
specified?
he have put an
Shouldn't it have
asterisk?
been the 11th commandment? Thou shalt not bang kids. Like, come
um,
on. Like, it should have been in there.
that falls under adultery and sexual immorality because
No.
you're not married to a kid,
But what
right?
if you did marry the kid?
If that's see, I
You
can't
can.
say anything about that. Like, if you find some loophole, I can't judge that particular circumstance. I default that to
That's the gray area. As long as
the
you're
judge.
married as a
I,
kid.
I'm not going to be the one on the throne on Judgment Day who says, well, technically you were married, so we're going to give you a bye. That's a weird
Well, that's
kind
what's
of.
crazy too, right? Weren't they all young in the Bible too?
Yeah,
Like, weren't all of
yeah.
Abraham's wives like 12 and
I mean, they were
11 and
young, yeah. So I mean, back then, I mean, that sort of thing was fine, but they were wives and concubines, and that was
so
like
why was it okay then and it's not okay now?
because because they were married. I already told. We've had this discussion already today, right?
Really? So that's the point of like of
Sexual
all
immorality.
as long as you're married, you can just do whatever,
That is
right?
why the rites of matrimony is a religious ceremony, right? Because you are being married and your marriage is being consecrated by God.
Get
Um,
married, then defile the woman that you love.
yeah, and so that was the argument I was going to make at you regarding well, between two consenting adults, sexual relations are fine, right? So objectively, I would push back at you because I would say, is nobody hurt by that? Like, if we look at, I made that joke earlier this week about a man can be fixed, like, because the chick asked, she asked some question about
Oh
women
yeah.
are always talking about how you can fix a man, but do men ever think I can fix her? But we look at, right, you look at a man as a fixable thing, right? And I likened men to a classic car, right? Whereas a woman who has been defiled, that's not something that, like, who wants a woman who has had some other man's penis in her? Like, that's gross. You do because, I mean, you deal with it because that's just the society that we live in. Like, there was a time where that was unheard of. Like, you were just disgusted by that. But now it's just like, well, we live in a world where women tend to start having sex at like 14, 15 years old.
Oh, just women, huh?
Well, I didn't have sex until I was 19 for the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
I was 16. I think I was 16.
Yeah. So, but my argument is, like, who wants a woman who has been defiled so many times, and you're doing this damage? And the joke about what is a lock? You know, you've got a lock that is easily opened with a screwdriver or any key, just because any key can unlock it. That's a shitty lock. But like a key that works in multiple locks, that's a master key, right? So like a guy who has sex with a bunch of women, I still think that's wrong. And I still think that's comparable in the defiling or whatever. Like, if I think it's bragging rights. It's bragging rights amongst guys.
I mean, come on. Both know. I mean, I know. I can't speak for you, but I will argue that it is best when it's done by people who know what they're doing and have experience. And I haven't had sex. I've never had sex with a virgin before. All the women I've ever been with, this is me getting on the real tip. All the women I've ever been with have been pretty experienced, and it's always been a great experience. So I don't know. I don't agree with you on that. I don't know if I want to be with a girl that didn't have any experience.
So okay,
or at least wasn't down to reciprocate. You know what I mean?
Sure. And I can agree with you that sex with somebody who is experienced is better than sex with somebody who is inexperienced. But like, part of that gift of sex in itself is like a gift. It should be considered a gift. It should be something special. It's not something, and this is where there's going to be two different camps. There's going to be people who are very like, hey, I just want to have sex to feel good or whatever, and and have no emotional attachment to it, and I just want to have that release and then clean up and walk away and be done with it. The same sort of gratification that you can get from jerking off, right? But there are some people who just, like, that's all they want out of it. But, and I don't think I will get a whole lot of pushback from this, but maybe from you, because I know you've...
I'm the today.
Yeah,
I have to count.
You're going to argue with me regardless, but I think there's something to be said when you compare sex, like meaningless, emotionless sex, to sex with somebody that you legitimately love and care for. There's going to be a difference in how it makes you feel as a whole versus just that physical be done with it, right? You're gonna get more out of it when there's some kind of passion and some kind of actual connection behind it. But again, you're not going to have that emotional, euphoric kind of like feeling with just that passionless physical sex. You're gonna get it from when you have sex with somebody that you love. Now, if you treat sex as a gift and it's your first time with someone else who is it's their first time, it's probably going to be a very embarrassing, awkward, difficult, not particularly pleasurable experience. Like, I remember my first time. It was just okay. But again, I didn't really know what I was doing. She did, but, I didn't. So it was kind of like a weird situation. And for that reason, I think when you start off, it's just meaningless. It's just a physical coming together of two people and just very like blank and whatever. I keep using the word meaningless, but that's what it is. But once if it's somebody over time, especially if this is your wife that you're having sex with the first time and it's her first time, you're gonna get better. You're going to start to like, hey, how can we kind of mix this up? How can we do better? How can we make this better for us? And that's part of the whole marriage thing is, and I know some of the people probably don't want to hear this, but my wife and I still talk about, like, well, let's try this new thing, or let's try something new, or let's mix it up, let's try this, or let's do this, let's go to the store and find something to mix it up a little bit, right? And that's just part of, like, when you love somebody and when you're with somebody for a long time, you want it to be better for that person, and you want the experience to be better for both of you. And I think when you treat sex as a gift rather than just some thing that you do, like eating, right? When you eat, you can eat just for the purpose of nourishing your body, and not eat anything that tastes particularly good, but you can get the nourishment that you need out of food by preparing a very bland meal. But sometimes we like to have good food, and we like to put in a lot of effort, and we like to prepare something nice, and we like to change it up. If you have meatloaf every Monday, sometimes you might want to try pizza on a Monday just to mix it up a little bit, right? So food is it's kind of the same way. The more that you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. Whereas the physical aspect of sex, yeah, you can get that from sex, and you can get it with anybody who's willing to accept U.S. dollars, right? Or just anybody that you meet at a bar. You can do that just to get that physical gratification. But wouldn't you rather, like, put in the work and have a nice meal that you can sit down and really just enjoy the taste, enjoy the food, and get the nourishment out of it? Like, that's kind of where I'm going with this, is like, if you treat sex like you would a nice meal, there's something more to it than just eating something like an MRE that has the amount of calories that you need to survive for the day or whatever. Tastes like shit, but you're going to get the nourishment that you need out of it. You can go jerk off in the shower, you can fuck some hooker, and you can get that physical gratification, but are you really enjoying it? Nah, I don't know. That's where I would argue there's something to be said about sex that is backed by love and some kind of emotional attachment than there is whatever. Anyways, that's my opinion on the matter, and that's why I think sexual immorality, I'm very much against sexual immorality in any color or whatever. Like, I think adultery is wrong because it hurts, not necessarily because I wouldn't say, like, if I went out and I had sex with some other woman, again, for the same reason I just said, I don't think I would get the same, well, I know I wouldn't get the same thing out of it as I get with my wife. But it also, I stand the chance to hurt my wife. I could possibly hurt this other woman if she, for some reason, all of a sudden developed some kind of attachment to me where she's like, well, like, why don't you leave your wife? We can go do this. Now I've given myself up to you and you're just going to blow me off. Or even a hooker. I go and bang a hooker or whatever. I still think that there's some kind of, like, physical, psychological damage that you're doing to these women when their life depends on their ability to just perform sexually. And they've become, like, this dancing monkey who it's like, hey, here's money, open up your legs. That's got to be pretty degrading. Like, even to the people who do it as, like, a sense of empowerment. Like, I am offering up my body as my means of income and I'm very good at it. That's still got to be, like, at the end of the day, they got to think, like, wow, all I am is just a couple holes. And again, that's psychologically damaging, emotionally damaging.
I'm sure both of them are laughing all their way to paying their law school bill.
Yeah, I bet. I bet they're going to law school.
I have to push back a little bit on your argument, only because I don't subscribe to the abstract crap. Like, when you say, oh, love, like, this is what I hear. I hear love makes sex, or being marriage makes sex better. And so I'm thinking, oh, does that, which I can't concur or deny because I've never been married. I've never had sex in a marriage. I've had sex with married women, but I've never had sex with in a marriage.
Oh, so you know what it's like then.
In a marriage. So what I'm gathering is that you're saying either the orgasm when you're married during sex is much better than an orgasm than when you're not married and having sex, because I take out the aspect of love, because to me love is abstract. And so when you say when you love someone, I think, well, every woman that I've ever had sex with I was in love with in some way. Even the prostitutes, even the hookers that I slept with, I can honestly say I was in love with some of them. And that's That's who I am. I'll say that. And I think all the women I've been with a lot of girls, man. I dated a lot of girls in my life, and I look back and think some of them I have regrets. I go, I should have never let that one go, and some of them I go, man, I really treated her poorly. And I go, and even now, like in my old, and it's much worse in my old age because I look back and go, man, I really love that girl. What the fuck was wrong with me? I still have feelings that, like, I think, wow, that could have worked, if I wasn't such an asshole, or if I had done this, or if I had done that. And so when you say love, I think of it as like a generalization, or I try to like narrow it down to this like specific love that you say that comes with marriage. And so I don't know. I can't. It's the one part that I can't refute you because I've never experienced marriage sex, being in a marriage and having sex with my wife. I've never experienced that, but I can say that, and this is me going out on a limb, is I don't imagine that an orgasm with being married is any different than an orgasm with anybody else.
It's not. No, I'll agree with you. The orgasm is the same. When I talk about there's more to sex than the orgasm, is what I'm saying. When I talk about like the emotional, because you talk about abstract, so we'll remove all the abstract, right? Love is merely just what familiarity over time, right? Is the argument, but you develop like this connection between. You can have that physical connection with anybody, right? You can go and have sex. You can hold hands. You can kiss. You can hug. You can whatever. That's the physical connection or whatever. You can rub your little feet together or whatever. Rub your legs and touch all over each other's body. That's the physical connection.
Is that how it happens?
That's gonna be the same. Let me tell you how sex works. It's just basically this. That's the physical connection. That's gonna be the same regardless of whether you're married, whether you're a single guy banging a married woman, two guys having sex together or whatever. Like, it's gonna be the same. You're gonna ejaculate. It's gonna feel exactly the same. Whatever. It's that emotional connection, the mental connection that you share with this person, the spiritual connection, whatever you want to call it. When you form that bond, you start to feel those things a little bit differently than you would if you weren't. So it's not necessarily a married thing. I would say that it's a genuine, true love, and I'm not saying that your instances of love were any different than mine. I wouldn't ever say that because I don't know, and I think that they probably were very comparable to mine. And so one person's idea of love or one person's experience in love is, I can't say that it was any different than mine, and you can't quantify that. So I can only assume that you've experienced the same type. But once you've developed this familiarity over time, and once you become emotionally attached to somebody beyond okay, what all do I need to do to get this person in bed? Or what about this person do I specifically like? Once you start to entwine, and Mike said it in the chat, the emotional connection makes it better. Once you start to entwine yourselves together with this, like, over time, your emotional attachments, your physical attachments, your mental attachments, all these things where you become attached to that person. And here's scripture for you. Man will leave his father's home and become one with this other person. You become the same. In scripture it says you become the same body of the same body. You treat yourself well. Likewise, you should treat your spouse well. You should treat them as your own body because you have become one body. It's this idea of entwining together to a point where sex becomes so much more than just the physical release. And frankly, ask any woman, ask most women, sex is more emotional for them than it is for men. For us, it's a very physical release. It's a very physical thing. For women, it's very emotional, and that's where they get a lot of that's why when women joke or they talk about how they didn't experience an orgasm, a lot of times that just doesn't matter, because they got something out of it. They may not have gotten the physical orgasm out of it, but they get something from it beyond the physical. So it's kind of along those lines, and that's my argument is, Again, I'm not saying that your experience with, loving women for one reason or another, or one thing about a woman or another, I think it has more to do less with the abstract concept of love and more about the very like specific science-based familiarity over time and all your aspects of your being becoming attached to this person and your wants and their wants meeting together, and all that stuff that actually goes into the scientific concept of love, which, like you said, is a very abstract thing. So that's where I was going with it. Did you have anything that you wanted to shill, V?
I know, we were like, dude, like, where did time go? We just got on this tangent, and next thing you know, and it's my fault, dude. I think I told you this. I cut back on the trees. I haven't been chiefing as I have decided I needed to cut back for a while, and so I've been all amped today, and I didn't expect to show up and be all argumentative and contrarian. I was just kind of that way, which I guess that I am that way, but most of the time I'm like, what, dude? As always, thanks for showing up, guys. We love you. Follow us on Twitter and on my LinkedIn. I've got my LinkedIn. Tom has a Instagram. Send us DMs, tag us, whatever. We love to respond. Jump in the Discord with us. We have a blast in there. I know sometimes I get in there and I'll start ranting about something and nobody says anything, and I'm just like, well, I said it. I said it. Somebody had to have read it, right? But there are some good times in there when we all get to touch base and get emotional and, be friends. That's what's cool about the Discord, I think, is that we get in there and we're all just friends. We're homies. And I really like that. So jump in whenever you guys want. Still doing a contest for our 700 subscriber, or the person who is quick enough to take a screenshot of the 700 subscriber. Send me a picture of it into my DM on Twitter, and I will buy you a shower curtain of your selection from the Redbubble site, which we have clothes on. So, like, if you're anxious and you want to get a shirt, get up in there, get you a shirt. We've got some pretty cool ones. The M-Files design is out now. We love that one. It's very cool. What else? Am I missing anything? Did I miss anything?
Not what do you got? Not that I know of.
I feel like that's it. That's pretty good.
Just close out. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. Thanks, you guys, for tuning in. Whoever it was last week after I did that very, like, hat in hand panhandling shit about buying a shirt, two people got on Redbubble right after the show and bought some stuff. And I don't know who it was. It doesn't tell me who it was. But I do appreciate, we both appreciate a great deal when you guys do buy our stuff. Because honestly, that's the only way that we make money. We don't ever want to have to go behind a paywall or any of that stuff, or we don't have to have any of that subscriber shit. We just like coming here and doing this. So if you buy our stuff or buy the stuff from Redbubble, we can obviously, lord that over people like, hey, we made $26 this week, like selling shirts and shit. And then I get to pick on everybody who says that my art sucks. I get to say, well, how many fucking shirts did you sell? I sold 2 this week. So
yeah, that's right.
But yeah, that's it. Thanks you guys for tuning in. Next week we will be talking about vaccines. This is the end of my semester, so I have plenty of time to kind of clean up my notes that I rushed to take today and to prepare for the show, but thankfully we didn't get into it. We'll be talking about the vaccines. If you haven't already gotten your vaccine, don't. At least wait until we talk about it next week, and you'll see why.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.